Welcome back to the Coaches Playground, guys. I'm super excited to be joined today by Katie St. Clair. And I was doing some research and looking into what she's got going on. And I think you guys will be pretty excited. And I was really excited to dive in some of these concepts here. So thank you so much for being here, Katie. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited and glad that we got the connection and from
Yes.
Tony. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Through Tony. How do you know Tony?
God. Well, he's a legend.
Everyone knows Tony. Tony Gentilcore. He's a legend. That's right.
Yeah, but also I just respect how he is able to be a coach who has learned and really worked hard to understand the complexity of the environment we're in and then simplify it to make it accessible for everyone. And I just really respect that. And I think he's got an amazing understanding of why that's so important. Instead of shoving to one side or the other, he keeps the necessary, information while also making it accessible to everyone. I just think that's wonderful.
Yeah, he's always had this knack for simplifying, for just making you just go, yes, yeah, okay, that's it, right? And then he's just a likable guy.
Yes, like keep it fun. It doesn't have to be all serious. We can have a little fun with this stuff.
Yes, I think too, and I've been guilty of it too. I'm sure you have. Like, we just building our business, or when we're looking at our fitness, we just tend to take it too seriously, right? And it's not supposed to be that serious.
No, everything should have love and fun behind it, basically.
Oh, now we're talking the same language. I like it. I wanted to kind of jump in where one of the connection points that I found when I was researching was that we both come from sports backgrounds. And so it sounds like your big sport, am I correct in saying it was gymnastics?
It was because, when you get pulled into that world and you start competing at a high level at a very young age, it takes up every single moment of your afternoon. So you leave school and, you might have an hour and a half. I think if I recall correctly, the older I get, the harder it is to remember my times. But I went to gymnastics at 5, and I usually would get home around, or maybe it was 6, but I'd get home around 8:30 or 9.
Yeah.
Every single day by the time I was in like maybe 5th grade. So you're talking like a huge time commitment. And that's with a lot of sports, but gymnastics, because you peak so young, you don't really have, I guess nowadays, like we talk about don't specialize too early and make sure you're doing a variety of sports until you get to that peak age where it really matters, then start specializing so you don't have as many compensatory patterns and all of this stuff that goes on with specializing early and going too hard. But with gymnastics, you're trying to get it in basically before puberty. And you can delay puberty for only so long.
Yeah.
We can keep working and we can keep moving. And at some point it's probably going to hit, you know what I mean? So there's this like need to like get it in. I think that's changing a little bit. Like Simone Baez is definitely challenging that right now. But yeah, so basically my life was in a wonderful way. My parents wouldn't have pushed me to do it. In fact, I think they were kind of like, so you want to maybe think about this?
You want to like go climb a tree or something?
Yeah.
And just,
chill out.
Yeah. What do you think? I love this conversation around. So I think we can both agree, and I think everyone listening who has played sports can agree. There's some amazing lessons from playing sports. I mean, sports has taught me so much about myself and about what's important in the world. I like to often, though, like looking back now with what you know now, not only as a professional, but as a mother too. I mean, what do you think about that? The fact that like literally from 5th grade on, you spent your entire quote unquote childhood in a gym.
Well, there were some really great life lessons and benefits that I learned, which was that if you are determined enough, that's great, but it doesn't matter unless you're willing to do every single thing it takes and continue to push forward as much as humanly possible to achieve your goal. And very few people in this world today, I think, understand the value of really just working freaking hard. So the fact that I was exposed to that, while it was a privilege, it was a privilege that I got the opportunity to make the decision to work hard. So everyone should understand that many people could never afford to go to gymnastics classes. It was a privilege that my parents could afford to send me to them. So I had the opportunity to work hard. The problem in this day and age is that that privilege is not available to children for many socioeconomic reasons. And most of our sports are driven by the fact that that privilege exists. And I didn't realize that when I was young, but now with my son, you know, still he's going to be privileged, right? Like I'm going to try to do everything I possibly can to provide for him. But you imagine how many kids could have just been off the charts amazing if they had that privilege, you know? And I wasn't one of I didn't make it. Like I got to 16 and had to give up. But there are many kids that could have if they had my privilege. So that's just another side note that made me think of it.
No, and I think that conversation is just, I mean, over the past year with the Black Lives Matter and I mean, up in Canada here where I am, it's, there's some events have happened recently where it's very clear that the Indigenous population does not get the same privilege that the white population does. Like it's unfortunately just a part of our history. And I think it's a really good conversation, you know, first of all, around privilege, and around, you know, it just comes back to gratitude and being grateful for, like you and I'm sure I'm sure not every day is great for you, because I have my bad days too with business, but shit, are we lucky to be able to build our own business? I mean, how awesome is that privilege of living in a country where we're free, where we can choose to build a business if we want, and then having the opportunity to build the business and not be having to, you know, scrounge up money to pay rent and those types of things, right?
Yeah. And I think having a perspective outside of that, like for me, as a young child, I had all my needs met, if that makes sense. But emotionally, I actually had a very, very, very hard upbringing. Like, I don't want to get into it, but you know, it was tough.
Yep.
And I had to learn how to navigate that on the outside. And what sports allowed me was an ability to create a safe space for myself, which I would imagine if you don't have the resources and you don't have that safe space in your family life, then you even more so need these privileged things that we have in the sports environment, right? So like if we could give that to children, no matter what their upbringing, it's going to provide them with this safe space that they can just be free for an hour, 2, 3 hours. You know what I mean? So there's benefits of that when you look into the dynamic of what sports provide overall for our society. But then also we can take an even bigger step back and go, well, how does that shape our communities? And even, you know, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger if you start broadening back. But I don't want to get too off topic. So
hey,
you ask
off topic is the name of the game here. And I just think this is such a good conversation. Like I remember, like I played hockey, which is like the least accessible sport on earth. Like, and I know,
yeah, like nobody played hockey where I was from. We
right.
weren't.
Yeah. I mean, in Canada, you know, most people play, but there's still a barrier. I mean, I remember my parent, like every dollar they had was going to me playing hockey because they knew I loved it. And it was a safe space for me too. And it was a place where I could express myself, where I could fit in. But I remember doing a project in university there was like one of our communities in our city, which is definitely poorer and, you know, it's kind of one of those communities where it's a struggle. and the police had actually gone in and created a hockey program for these kids, donated equipment, all that kind of stuff. And I remember them saying, like, if these kids don't play hockey, they are going to be in a gang because they're going to do something. They need to feel that connection and that safe space somewhere, because they're not getting it at home. Their parents just don't have the tools, and they don't have they're either working or they're struggling with their own issues. And so I couldn't believe how much that hit me. Just, I didn't realize it. You know, I'm a middle-class kid. My parents both worked and both made good money. So even just a whole sports conversation, I think it needs to start there, that like, hey, first off, not everyone gets the opportunity to do this. Now let's talk about the lessons that we learned.
Right. I just think it's a good place. And I will say that when I went off to college, things were very different. And I was on a full scholarship. So that meant keeping up my scholarship. Plus I was an athletic trainer or student athletic trainer, which was excessive amounts of extra work. Plus I had to work, a job all the time to try to keep up with finances and stuff. But I don't think if I had those lessons from gymnastics at an early age, I would have been able to keep my ducks in a row, even though I'm pretty sure in college I kind of melt down and did not do my best. But I mean, you know what I mean? I was doing a lot that sports taught me. And today, as a 42-year-old woman who started a social media program, or, got on social media and then started a business on social media, all those life lessons shaped the ability to literally, for simplicity, just work my ass off.
Yeah.
And not up, if that makes sense. I don't know.
100%. I was you when you said that, first of all, about being determined, but then also, like, that's great, but there's more. Like, you actually have to do more. And I think I was talking to my coach recently about, like, so he's part of a bigger program where they've seen a ton of people come through and have success and not have success. And I said, look, you got this huge amount of people. What's the separator? What's the differentiator from, like, the people who are the testimonial worthy people and the people who just fall off? And he's like, straight up, man, they just want it more. Like, he's like, they're all getting the same tactics. They're all getting the same, mindset tools. They're all getting everything, but like, the people who succeed. And I think this is such a great lesson that sports teaches us. They just straight up won't quit. Like, they just won't stop going. And like you said, they will just do whatever it takes to, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how much they don't want to do it, they will just do it, because it's like, no, like, I know that this is what I want to do. This is the impact that I want to have. These are the people I want to serve. I will not stop until I succeed.
Well, that right there, when you said at the end, I think has more to play into it. So based on the impact I want to have and the people I want to serve. And those two things to me are driven by your true why. So if you understand that all of your ability to go hard and continue to push is based on an emotional connection that you probably made at some point in your life. So those two things have to connect first. Like, how, like, we had Tony's wife on the other day.
She's the best.
Yeah, she's awesome. Dr. Lisa Lewis. And, when I got done with that conversation, I had a few clients that were coming in, and instead of, like, one of them today, he was just going on and on about how, like, does he need to do intermittent fasting? He feels like he's been off the wagon for a couple weeks. He's been, like, partying too much and eating too much, but he's, like, so sold on the exercise and blah, blah. And I kept going, okay, so, but why? And then he would be like, because I want to be the best squash player ever. Okay, why do you want to be the best squash player? Okay, but why because I just want to be able to do this till I'm 65. So why do you want to be able to do it? Like, getting to the root of all of that creates the emotional connection that allows you to solidify the value. And then that is the small little gold nugget that keeps you engaged in the process of pushing forward.
Yeah.
And if you don't create the emotional connection behind it, it's going to be so hard to create that habit. Right. So, like, for me, it always came back to, in most things in my life, that the only way for me to complete a task, and that could be at school, which many times I failed so many times, but I didn't create that emotional connection to it that deeply felt to the core like something that resonated within my whole being. And that's the difference.
I really want to dig in on that. Do you feel like, so the whole, like, I mean, this is really an extension of, and maybe a deeper look at the whole start with why type of thing. Like, we got to find the why. I find, and I was, and I think you were touching on this when you were like, when you really needed to find the deep emotional connection. I find that a lot of people kind of fake it with their why. They're like, or they like, they decide on, they get asked these questions and they're like, they kind of go on based on what someone else says. It's like, oh, well, like, I should want to make 10K a month. So I just want to make 10K a month. Sure. And that's, because I want to impact a lot of people. It's like, yeah, but why? Like, why do you care about impacting so many people? Like, the deeper you go, the more you realize the money doesn't mean anything. What matters is the impact. Like, do you feel that way, that sometimes people maybe lie to themselves? And I'd love to hear, if they do, what your thought is on how can we get them out of that, or how can we get them to really find that authentic connection?
Yeah. So for me, this probably would involve tears because truly, when you get to that place where you let down your guard within yourself, and that could be with someone else or without someone else, where you have to just be like, oh my God, I like need to let it out and I'm just going to cry. Like, it's that much and it's that
Yeah.
deep, that I think a lot of people, rightfully so, because this world is hard and judgment is everywhere and we're never enough. And especially, I'm not going to pull the mom card, but kind of like, as moms, we're holding it together for our kids. We're holding it together for our husbands, for our, and so are men too. But there's this sort of like tug to be so strong with your children. And I can't really put it into words, but I know that every mom out there probably understands what this feels like. It's something that changed me for sure. But in that process, I had to relearn how to find that emotional piece of myself without the worry that it might impact my child or my ability to be a really good mother.
Yeah.
And that switch over in my brain of sort of, it's okay to be me and to find that connection and be emotionally vulnerable to others and go after exactly that why, even though it is causing me to be in that breakdown phase or that uncomfortable, I want to cry phase. And yet my little one over here is making me want to do the complete opposite because I need to be strong for him.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you work through that and be able to be that duality as a human and allow for other humans to see that and be okay with it and know that that's part of the process to be able to be true to again find that gold nugget of the why, be able to create um the meaning behind what you're doing. Otherwise it is kind of fake because no one wants to, people don't want to get there. Like, nobody wants to go, like, okay, so people go to therapy for years. Why do we go to therapy? I went to therapy for years because it took me effing forever to start to let go. Right? Otherwise, if you could just let go in the beginning and be like,
Save thousands of dollars. That's for sure.
But it's so hard because nobody wants to like dive into that deep stuff. And I think that's ultimately what allows you to connect and be true, like to your point, it's not necessarily always about the money. It can also be about I think mostly it has to be about that inner emotional connection to what you're doing and what service you're providing that makes the difference. And if you
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah. And I think even to like, to a lesser degree, right? These coaches who I know you're working with in your program, and I work with in my program, like, they got to be quote unquote, just like you got to be strong for your son. They got to be strong for their clients, right? Well, I got to be the leader. I got to be strong. But I think the other side of that coin is these people who are looking to you as a leader, you can lead in that way by saying it's okay, or showing it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to really get to that breakdown type place, because that's what we all need to do. So the work that you do and the willingness to go to that place is what your kids or your clients or those people who look up to you need. You're just giving them the opportunity to do the same, really, by allowing yourself to go to that hard place. And I feel the same. It's like so many layers needed to be uncovered before I could finally get there and realize. And I still think you're probably the same. It's an ongoing journey. There's always going to be more layers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Always. There's always more.
Where you are in life and how much pressure is coming at you. And
Right.
yeah, and it's easy to shift out of that and start going down the lane of I'm just like not really being true to myself. I'm sort of like going back to those old habits. Like I talk a lot about those compensatory patterns of the human body, like, whatever we adopt in order to breathe and walk better. And the same thing probably goes with our compensatory patterns of the brain.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like our mental state, you know what I mean? It's like when
Yeah.
you're with your parents for a weekend and all of a sudden you're like, why do I feel weird? Why do I feel like I'm 7 again?
Oh man, you really, yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say in case my parents listen. Yes. Um, but yeah, like our bodies and our brains are such good. They're such great, they're just so good at compensating to this. Like, okay, well, we got to make this thing work. So
Yeah.
I don't care if I screw everything else up. We're going to make this thing work. Right. And the brain acts the same way. Is like, well, you know what, if you want to fit in, you want to be accepted, you're feeling a little vulnerable, and you kind of go back to those old patterns, well, that's what we needed this is what you asked for. You wanted to be safe and fit in. Like it's just doing its job to keep us safe, to keep us comfortable, when we just need to keep pulling it back on the tracks of, nope, the only way forward is to get uncomfortable. The only way forward is to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit about these compensatory patterns, because I know you have a really, really interesting story around what happened to you from years and years and years of just beating your body up and really pushing it to the limit. Is, your story is, it sounds like, and you can fill in the blanks here, that you kind of got to a point where you could barely move with chronic neck and back pain, and yet you were in the fitness industry. Is that right?
Yeah. That's pretty crazy.
So,
And I'm married to a physical therapist. So,
so talk to me a little bit about first of all, I know you are big on like the mental aspect of pain and like the struggles that come along with that. So maybe start there, and then we can dig into really like how you came out of this place.
well, I think looking back, I had pretty significant strategies for managing gravity and breathing. And by that I mean, I was an ex-gymnast, so I basically allowed myself to take any route to compete and do the level of activity that I wanted to do. I also competitively wakeboarded and I did a lot of stuff. I played 4 varsity sports, so I was pretty intense as a young person. So I probably had developed these for a really long time. And then I would say, so my husband and I moved here about 13 years ago from California. And we were both working as trainers out in California. And honestly, like, it was pretty easy. Like, yes, it was expensive, but so we barely got by, but we were fine. And we weren't married at the time. We were just dating. And, but I knew if he went to PT school and he applied to USC and then USC, not South Carolina, but Southern California. Anyway, I ended up getting to MUSC and we moved across the country because my family's over here. And I really think to this day, I look back and say to myself, holy shit, like, I didn't even realize what that meant for me. I was working for Hewlett Packard. I was running their corporate wellness program in Palo Alto. Like, I had a really good gig. Like, I was climbing up the wellness corporate ladder, and training, and just like it was good. And then all of a sudden I move here and it's way different. The fitness industry in California, in that area, and then in Charleston, South Carolina, 15 years ago, holy, I was like, this is so different. I moved here, nobody cares about it.
Right.
Not
Bit
that
of
they
a
don't.
different lifestyle in South Carolina than Southern California.
Yeah, so I had no job, no career. He's in school all day, and DPT school is actually very, very hard. And so he's just like constantly at it, and I'm basically by myself trying to figure it out. And I had taken a couple random jobs. I was waiting tables. I was just trying to do anything I could. And that was really an ego. I had to suck my ego up and be like, well, like, I know you were there at Hewlett Packard making your six figures, and now you basically can't even make income other than waitressing. Like, it was hard.
Wow. Wow.
And so I feel like that was a good lesson. It was also a time for me to put my big girl pants on and just start fresh. So I waited tables at a Mexican restaurant. And so I would go into work. I tapped into a resource I had at the medical university to work at their wellness center as a contractor, which was amazing. So I started there. And in the mornings, I would go in and see like a 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. client, if I was lucky enough to have them. Then I would go wait tables for like the lunch shift at the Mexican restaurant. Then I would go back to work, whatever hours I could possibly get in the afternoon. I would teach so many group exercise classes, which you just hate after a certain amount of time, because it's exhausting and you have to be on so much.
Yeah.
But I just take anything I could possibly get. So anyway, I don't even remember what the question or where we were at, but
let's keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah,
this is great.
Insanity. And I was willing to pretty much do whatever it took because we were really poor. Yep. We were accruing a lot of debt. And because the student loans, and we had to take out more, like you can take extra out on your student loans, because I didn't have a job. So we were trying to support both of us. Charleston's actually a very expensive city to live in. A lot of people probably don't realize that. And there's not like, well, at the time there was like no apartments like downtown. It was just like, it's a crazy place to live. But anyway, so we figured it all out, and I just started going hard for a while. And then finally, like within 2 years, I was pretty much set up with clients.
Right. So essentially just grinding it out, and then you kind of set yourself up for success. Now, what happened? When did it come into play? These like chronic injuries, when did they really take hold on you?
So I would say probably, I want to say I was like 28, 29. And I had joined a tennis league here, and everyone in the league was like 20 years older than me, but way better than me. And I feel like I crushed it because I was athletic enough to run the court, but I wasn't good at placement or anything. You know what I mean? Because I played in high school and stuff. So they put me as the singles, one of two singles players, and I'm just running around just crazy and like crushing it and thinking I'm going to win every match. And there was this one match and I slid, like literally my right foot slid in front of me, and I almost went into like a half split, and I took a backhand, and I just heard this massive pop in my back. And I managed to stand up. It was one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. I managed to actually like it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I stood up and I went and sat in the bleachers to watch everybody to finish instead of going home. I had to completely stop the match. I was in the third set, and I went home that day. And after that, I couldn't walk for like 6 days. I was on, of course, steroid dose pack. I had access. I went to see professors that Jason knew. So kind of got through that process with a bunch of steroids and steroid injection and all of that, and was able to start slowly moving again. And then from then on, it was chronic back and neck stuff. I mean, every 3 months I'd wake up and I couldn't turn my head. And when I say I couldn't turn my head, I could go like, you can't see me out there on,
Podcast land.
But yeah, but I'd be like turning my head like 15 degrees, and I'd have to like turn my whole body because nothing would move. And it was so painful. And this went on for so I was 28. I had my son at 34. So pretty much that whole time. And there was like a year or so where I would go like a whole year without like a massive breakdown. But for the most part, I'd have these like chronic setbacks every 3, 4, 5 months. And, I had to call and cancel my clients. I had to sometimes go in and just be on, like on Advil or whatever to just try to get through the day. And it was fine. Like, I feel like I had such a tough like mentality that I could push through the pain a lot, but I think it was making my problems worse. Like I was never fixing them. And even the physical therapy I got was a lot of passive manual therapy. So nothing ever stuck.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I mean, you go right back into like, well, I just got to do what I got to do, and I got to make money, and, my clients need me. So let's do this. I know this is a big part of what you're doing now. What was the thing that really started the shift towards living pain-free, or at least being able to manage this pain?
Yeah. So I think it got excessively worse as I went through a period of infertility battle with my husband for probably 2.5 years, where we did IVF treatments. And when you're going through something like that, it's so emotional that you can't decipher whether the pain that you're having is due to the stress of the situation. Is the stress of the situation making the pain worse? Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's hard to even know. Yep. Are you forgetting about the pain because you're in the moment and then it's making it worse later on? Like, there's so many factors. And so, and not to mention the hormones, and my body just was a wreck after that. And we were lucky enough to have my son, Quincy, so I was 34 at that point. And after I had him, the interesting thing that I noted, and everyone thinks I'm insane. My family thinks I'm insane, except for my husband. Like, I think he gets it. But my mom and my dad and the doctors, they said, you had a C-section, so you really need to get ahead of your pain and you need to take these pain meds. I had no pain. I had a cut through my lower abdomen, had a baby pulled out of me, and I never took one painkiller. And I think that's a testament to how much pain I already was in, and what tolerance I had built up over that time. Mm-hmm. And it's shocking to me, even looking back. I did take some anti-inflammatories for 2 days.
Right. Which is unheard of.
It's weird. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel anything. I actually felt amazing. Like, I was breastfeeding. Then my son had colic, like day 4. And he was like, like screaming. And at that point, I didn't feel anything in my body. You just become like a machine. Like, you are trying everything you possibly can to fix them. And that went on for about really bad, like 6 or 7 months. He had acid reflux pretty bad, and I had to change my diet to continue to feed him and all those things. So anyway, that at some point, like after a year, that ended. And I just felt like a hot mess. Right. My body sucked. I had been through an emotional, 4 or 5 years. I just was like exhausted. And I reached out online and I made a post on Facebook and I was like, I either am going to quit my job and find something that just requires no effort or passion whatsoever in my life, or I need to figure out a way to make this something I enjoy again. And so I just was like, does anybody have any resources for good continuing ed? Because, FRC, I didn't want to do any of that. I was over all of that. Like I needed, none of it ever got to the root of what was happening. And somebody recommended Postural Restoration Institute, and I took their course. Literally, like I signed up, went and drove to Orlando myself. I remember like pumping to save milk to like go.
Right, so you could go.
Trip, like whole thing. And that was when I realized, oh, holy crap! Like this is what I've been missing. Like I've been missing the neurology. I've been missing the influence of all of these outlying factors of gravity and respiration and everything that I always knew that I wasn't seeing everything clearly.
Right.
I just didn't know where to get the information.
Yeah. And from what I've heard with Postural Restoration Institute is it's like, it's so simple, not simple, but it's so like, it just hits the depth of just like, well, breathing is life. How could we not have thought of like making sure that we were doing this right, and nobody, I mean, a lot of people do talk about it now. It's becoming more and more popular, but so many people don't even address it when we're talking about movement or when we're talking about like, say, having a baby or,
Right.
all these things that like is so important to have your breath maximized, I guess, or as efficient as possible. And yet the majority of us are kind of missing the boat on that. So you kind of take this course, and then by the sounds of it, you were like, wow, more people need this. And especially more people who are struggling with the things that I was struggling with, because this was the first thing that you had found that actually got to the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of move forward with building and creating the Empowered Performance Program. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it was, this is over years, but basically I came to a place where I realized that none of this stuff is applicable in a gym setting for a strength and conditioning coach.
Right.
Like, I can't be doing rehab with clients. I'm not a rehab professional. I can't step out of my lane. And like, that's not what they're coming to me for. So I basically was like, I would just make up these random exercises that were basically facilitating and inhibiting the same muscles,
Mm-hmm.
and have people sort of breathe a certain way in them. That was just my way of figuring it out for like a regular client in the gym. And then, so I had gotten online before creating Empowered Performance. I worked with Kyle Dobbs, who is an amazing mentor of mine, and he helped me navigate just like how to get online for online clients, because I wanted to make money at a little bit, a side income, like a side gig. And so I had been doing that. I probably had like 10 clients. And then I think at one point I had a call with him and he was like, you should probably scale it now. And meaning like maybe do a group program or something to allow for more people to have your programming. And so Empowered Performance originally was just a group programming. Like I was thinking, I'll just teach a bunch of women how to feel better in their bodies and move better using this programming that I do regularly, this weird stuff. And then at the same time, I was working on a seminar that I was going to do here in Charleston locally to teach people about some of the things that I do in the gym to help trainers learn some of this information, but not have to like take these very advanced courses, kind of like simplify. So then I remember thinking, well, why wouldn't I just like, this program's 12 weeks that I made. Why wouldn't I just like incorporate the seminar into it so they can actually understand why?
Nice.
And that's so that's how Empowered Performance came to be.
I love that it, first of all, so just like, it just like totally makes sense how that came about, right? You had the success and you're like, more women need this. So you start to create something. And I mean, at the same time, bonus, you make more money from it, and you don't have to do a ton more work, and yet they're
Right.
still getting great results. And then you're like, well, I'm teaching this seminar. How I love how in your head it's like, well, they're going to get better results if I just have them go through the program. So
Right. So they're working out and doing all the stuff while they're learning about it. Like it just kind of made sense.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I just love that. I just think that there's too much. It feels to me like there's too much that just like a quick fix, even in the fitness industry for fitness professionals, where it's like, you're not going to learn everything you need to learn about this in 2 days or in one day. Like you
Oh,
have to do
yeah.
this.
Well, even when people take my mentorship and it's 12 weeks and they're still like, I just don't feel like I really get it. And I'm like, sign up for my membership because you probably need to keep going. Because let me tell you, I was studying this shit for 5 years before it even remotely made sense. And still to this day, I'm like, I don't know. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
being okay with the feeling of not knowing is part of the process.
And just getting curious on it and just
Yeah.
like asking the next question, taking the next indicated step and following the wonderful yellow brick road to whatever it is. Right.
Right. And
Um,
the other alternative is you just give up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And you stay, well, you just stay where you are, which a lot of people seem content with. But I know just having talked to you now, like you and I just aren't content with that. It's just not where we're going to go. It's not
right.
okay. Yeah. So I know you, I mean, obviously coming from your experiences, this was obviously a no brainer to bring to the female community. Um, you talked about how you wanted to bring together a group of badass women to learn together, to work together. I will strongly stand in the position as a feminist. I truly think that there still isn't enough for women. Why do you think it's so important to have a group of, like, unfortunately, I can't run a group of all women because I am not a woman. But why do you think it's so important to have that container, to have a group of women working together, learning together, and doing this stuff?
Well, okay. First of all, so I opened up Empower Performance this past April for men too. So
Oh, amazing.
yes.
Yes.
And it's not been without a lot of anxiety for me. And the reason that is because I think that all females felt safe. It felt safe for me. Like it felt safe that I knew that they understood the struggles that I also was going through. And so that they would maybe, I don't know, forgive's the right word, or not criticize or have less ego about where I am at. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
But then also that they would know that I recognized what they were, where they were at, and tried to be that safe space for them because
Mm-hmm.
I wholeheartedly think that um, there is something inherently different.
Yep.
Now, fast forward a year and a half into this, and I make the decision. But before I made this decision to let men in, I asked my whole membership. Like I asked the people that are my like ride or dies. I was like, what do you guys think? Like I would never do this unless you thought it was okay. And they were so supportive and wonderful about opening up, and with the thought process of, men need to learn from strong women too. And they need to understand that women are really wonderful teachers. Unfortunately, in my life, other than my gymnastics coach, I've never had a male that did not lead or teach to me, very rarely as a mentor, that was not, in my opinion, very ego driven. And so there was times where I just was like, oh my God, like I'm so scared to even walk in the room. I can't even think,
Right.
And I hated that. Like I hated it for myself. I hated it that it could have been something within me that made me feel that way. Like, and I explore those things and try to figure out the why behind them. But a lot of times I'm like, no, it wasn't just me. Like other people felt that way too. And so it's important to me that I create a space, whether there's men or women or whoever in it, that just feels like there is no dumb questions. You can be whoever you want. You can throw out the most ridiculous thing in the world and I'll be like, cool, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And I tell them all the time, like, you guys are smarter than me. Like, you provide more information than I probably do in this membership. I'm just facilitating the party.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying it's really awesome and cool that we probably all want to sit around and nerd out over this stuff on a Saturday night. Now that we do it on a Saturday night, the point is, like, have you ever been in a room with like a bunch of your like friends, like your friends that know nothing about fitness or any of this, and you're like, I really just want to be thinking about fitness.
Yeah. Like it's like we could talk about stuff, but I don't really care. Like I'd rather nerd out about other stuff, about mindset stuff or whatever. Yeah.
And I feel
totally
like
agree.
EP just ended up, I had no intention of starting a membership. It just ended up becoming that because we were all like, we don't want this to end because we kind of just want to keep talking to each other.
We just keep this thing going and I'll just keep hosting the party. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Like, don't break up with me.
Yeah.
I don't want to break up with you guys either.
Yes.
It's just kind of funny, And so now it's just like a bunch of really smart women who just love talking about this stuff and just find it fascinating, and in different ways. Like, some of them are more well-versed in certain areas of the body and different systems than I am, for sure. And we all kind of like come together and collaborate and think about what this means for the human existence, I guess. Like,
Yeah, on the biggest scale. Yeah. I think it's just a great reminder too. Men listening, we always got to be working on making sure that we're dropping the ego. I think it's just so important that, because that's what we were brought up to be for the most part, is to lead with ego. And it's in my opinion, or in my experience, it's gotten me nowhere good. Nowhere that was helpful for anybody else. But even just in creating a safe space for the women that they work with, or the other men that they work with, like, drop the ego, do the work to get rid of that ego so that you can provide a safe space, so that because people will not open up until they feel safe. And we talk to
understand what that's about. Like, I've always tried to figure it out and go, why would you do that? Because people are going to want to learn. To me, it's like obvious that nobody wants to learn from somebody who feels like that person's talking over them all the time.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit? I'm always so curious, but it's more like this, like, not wanting to share all of you or all of your information so that you can be the person that's up here while everybody else is down here.
Yeah. And I think it's a control thing. It's a power thing. It's there's always reasons behind it. But are they willing, once again, we talked about, like, are you willing to do the work required? Are you willing to do the work required and dig into why this is happening? Like, if you feel like your clients aren't opening up or don't necessarily feel safe, well, where do you need to do the work to allow them to? Where do you need to do the work to allow them to really fully express themselves?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So such a great lesson. So many great lessons to come out of just like an interesting story. I'd love to finish with one more. We've been rocked in the last 15 months, especially this industry, the fitness industry and the coaching industry. Where do you think it's headed? Where do you think the coaching industry, the fitness industry, whatever you want to call it, where do you think it's headed in the next years?
Wow, that's so hard to say. I feel as if sometimes I live in an echo chamber and it feels overly saturated with online content and courses, but sometimes I think that's just me because of the nature of who I follow or whatever. What I do think is that people seek connection. And if you are able to continue or to learn or to strive to provide better connection overall from an emotional standpoint, while still being okay within yourself, because you don't want to give too much of yourself where you feel like you're, exhausted. But if you can do that, then you're always going to have a place in this industry and it's going to be success. The people who come across, like, I can't remember how you said it earlier, but like they're faking it, like the why is not there. It's an inability to connect. So what's more important is that you just figure out why you can't connect
Right.
and work with someone on that. Once you learn how to connect and be open and vulnerable to everyone and empathetic, because that's what clients want is empathy, then you have the opportunity, like we said in the beginning, the luxury, you know,
Privilege.
the privilege to be able to do what you want to do. The
Mhm.
privilege comes because you are able to connect with that part of yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's just becoming more and more clear, and I guess more necessary as more people flood the space of coaching, because that's where it's headed. Like, let's be real. People are looking for that connection. And if you can't find a way to be authentic and just authentically connect with them, they're going to go elsewhere because there's just too many other options. But if you can, then not only are you going to, yeah, great, you're going to make more money, you're going to work with more people, but you're actually going to be able to change lives. Like, you're actually going to be able to do
Yeah.
what you set out to do.
Because if you can't do that, why don't they just go take an Orange Theory class or a
I
boot camp?
love that.
Or
Yes.
like, there's nothing wrong with those classes. They're great. But like, why would they care to see you? You're not connecting with them.
Yeah. And why would they pay all that money and all, just
It's
go do the
insane.
cheap thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like everybody needs to learn and they need to keep up with their content and they need to provide a good service. It's really important. But your clients kind of just, they need that, but they also need you to connect and really care about
100%.
them, you know?
100. Oh, I love that. I think that's a great note to leave it on. I really appreciate that. It's so awesome that we came full circle to that. Where, if people are looking at empowered performance program, anything like that, or just want to connect more with you, where can they find you?
So Katie St. Clair Fitness, it's STCLAIR, no E, .com or same on Instagram. My email's at gmail.com, same. So super easy. And the next Empowered Performance will not start. I'm taking the summer off.
I
I'm
love
taking
that.
it off. I just have other projects and stuff. So it won't start until September. But there is a wait.
Amazing.
So if they get on it, they can learn more about that when it, in the early bird stuff.
Perfect. Great. Well, I think there'll be some people interested. Well, thank you so much for doing this today. It's been a great conversation, and I'm so glad we connected.
Thank you so much too. I loved it.